Yeah, I wanted to include some more. I talked a little earlier about Reese's Bank having the Now card, a prepaid Now card um, that is set up and designed um, specifically as a prepaid card and not a checking account. And it's not a debit card; it's a prepaid card. Yet there's been like factors of like um, what access means in the way of a. I mean, if it's going to be the issue between whether or not it's a fixture in real estate, um, such as redundant frequency as a squelch type of access, uh, a medical power of attorney using a fixture in real estate as whether or not it will actually even be used as television programming or any method defining what a deed restriction is and what a deed restriction is, and if it's actually an affected part of an attached fixture of real estate or any detachable or the actual um, you know lifespan that's dictated whether or not if the lifespan is going to be the issue of human capital once again of investment terminology or just a method of banking involving only a checking account and every single person on the entire planet that way of a medical power of attorney, not limited to medical power of attorney, using the fixture in real estate to define whether or not if a deed restriction is only a method of banking involving only a checking account. The Regions Now card is a prepaid card, not a debit card. And it's supposed to be like prepaid cards being, 15-digit cards that seem to eliminate the issue of a method of payment or normally what does not involve a check as a direct deposit. And if the whole entire point of availability of information, either knowing or not knowing, or allowed or not allowed to have a direct deposit as a result of employment, is only some idea of whether or not of the entire point of an endorsement is some accusation of like a willingness of participation as whether it's some idea of the intelligence and opposite of like garnishment of actual earned. I mean, if it has to be called earned or wages in the way of like what only a prepaid tax would only represent in the IRA as an annuity, and give the impression of that based upon it being a prepaid tax, and actually earning interest bearing on a principle of accumulation of what IRAs do. Yet the Regions Now card is designed, and in the blink of an eye, networking seems to be continually an issue of like if anyone's going to decide if having a key to the city only represents some idea maybe beyond the parameter of like a waveform or like beyond the parameter. That's like quantum in waveform of attenuation, the UA, the attention of attenue, UA, attention and attenuation. The UA thing, huh? Parallel intention is 140 like attenuation, as well as alphanumerics itself, FBI psychology minus RCA, the 22 thing, and ultimately gets to the quantum side of being 22 in Japanese being 71 in Paraland and the 22 um, letters in the Japanese alphabet. Okay, that's only the information provided, only based upon networking of what only information means its availability. That's what a distribution of availability only presents of whether or not if access is anything other than what only availability means. I mean, I'm assuming that would actually be almost like a whether or not if a VPN of a vice president network or the VICE, the Immigration Custom Enforcement, is going to be the issue. Like once again, a checking account presenting an entire world of the World Bank itself, and even the Eurodollar, and likewise, international banking systems having access. What the real deal seems to be about whether or not a prepaid card is only the idea in coordination with the Social Security Administration. There's some idea of the ERISA statute because most people do not associate and The similarities of practical application of principle is something of the ERISA statute and not limited to, in any kind of way, to the Social Security Administration, if any at all factors of like knowing if that's really only a practical application of principle of the ERISA statute representing some idea of the IRA, yet it is an acronym. And the simple difference of human capital is the only real reality of investment terminology that determines whether or not if SAN software, the acronym of Storage Area Network, is going to be like a securities and annuities network. I mean, what determines human capital of investment terminology? Is it actual participation or just like knowing? Or is it a method of banking only representing maybe the idea of like a intellectual participation as a third person, as maybe not necessarily the idea of actually involved with some idea of like a first and second person, yet in international law, intellectual property is considered an easement of the meaning and value and content as a storage file that is being used of human capital, of the memory of its meaning and content. That way, likewise, in addition to checking account, completely the same principle of checking account presents the issue of whether or not it's just having fair usage. Only the idea of whether if a person even knows if their Bureau of Vital Statistics is presenting a birth certificate or a death certificate, or whether a certificate of deposit as a method of banking as a direct link to like the television programming and the medical power of attorney using fixture and real estate, determining if a deed restriction is on the idea of placing a hold as a boycott embargo as a method of banking that would represent some idea. I mean, if it's going to be anywhere close to anything like heavenly, as some idea of purgatory, or anything religiously in corporate venue of an ecclesiastical clergy involving some idea of corporate scribes, in corporate terminology involving a corporation or an eternal structure defined as an entity. Only of corporations of an eternal structure identified as an entity, and like where that's at as whether or not it really the venue is even going to be the idea of like it doesn't even involve shareholding at all, or the idea if the shareholder is only the thought of like a participating factor of increasing the value, having use of information such as a person's information, even Social Security Administration, or even the thought of like a current resident having some idea of like something that might be the thought of maybe some idea of maybe whether an option is only overriding potential issues that might might mean the clarity of like identifying the real issue, whether it's a known or not known fact, and what's the real issue of it being a known or not known fact. Getting someone to sound like maybe they might sound like they know what they're talking, or maybe even get the perception of knowing, and actually just like maybe repeating something that only sounds like auditing legal media, manufacturing auditing. I mean, years of it. Manufacturing auditing legal media of Social Security Administration presenting the last four of the phone number, okay? The thing about, Regions Bank presenting the idea that Regions Bank is some idea automatically associated with like, the pastel green, and 6th, 7th, and 8th grade presenting world history of the pastel green, identifying, the pastel green as Providence. Okay, like Regions Bank itself does. Likewise, the colors of Sprite and British Petroleum. Yet the thing about, Great Britain, Make America Great Again, is that Great Britain is the same exact colors of the United States flag with a different by design. Yet the Great Seal of the United States is like to the lower up under, the pyramid of, below even the Novus Ordo Seclorum of the left side of the pyramid on the back side of the U.S. $1 bill. Yet the Great Seal of the United States doesn't identify anything about like Great Britain, or the colors of the Great Britain flag being the same as the United States, or some idea of the Great Seal of the United States identifying any Deep Star 6 that would maybe present the issue of maybe color code of constitutional law in Egypt, in the way of like even the thought of like the color of oil, and think about Egypt and like Israel, and some idea of like between the biggest mouth of the river being the delta, being the triangle, and the pi r squared thing about it being a 3 point to a 6 point star, from a deep star six being the idea of like the depths, presenting the idea of color code, even the nanoluminous, ultimately getting measuring the density of luminous, and nanoluminous that way of like night vision, even the depth of the ocean, total different perception. But the thing of it is that um, the color code in the way of can be measured as a result in that way, and not that way at all in the depths of like the ocean, completely the opposite based upon the clarity and what density really is as a solid, a liquid, and like a gaseous like air thing, and like what clear vision would be normally based upon like the human capital factor. The thing is that the Paso Green presents the province of color code, like the two nine-hole golf courses. Not that it's identified in proper English numerical composition as a paraphrase, or the thought of gratuity, presenting the percentile in the way of like is it a left wing or right wing, eagle, or likewise a left or right wing percentile. The thing with it is that the humor about certain factors presenting the light scribe isometrics of Braille and the Jose can you see thing. I mean, it's very much the thought of a combination of what the elevator is in platform and architecture, and like measuring density of luminance that way as compared to what biometrics would present as light scribe of isometric you know the principle of like Jose can you see like Braille would be the perception that way, like biometrics as compared to Braille in the elevator as compared to biometrics of like even light scribe. I mean, the principle of practical application is there, knowing that Braille represents even the fingerprint and a whole different perspective of light scribe. I mean, either if the lights are on or off in the elevator, I mean, biometrics of the fingerprint really presents the same issue in the same way, in a whole different perspective of biometrics as compared to Braille. In any case, I mean, all that's going on, and the thing is, the point that I'm really getting at, okay, is that ultimately, what seems to be going on with like a supplemental security and the acronym, the misappropriation and allocation of Mississippi seems to be, the big deal, like what's going on with the equator and like Amazon.com, and some idea of like Egypt and, the Nile as compared to the Euphrates, and all the alphanumerics, I mean, ultimately getting to the plateau, okay, and the Ten Commandments, okay. Okay, like Moses, okay, 71 in Pearland, okay. The Charlton Heston getting the Ten Commandments. And up in the mountains on a plateau, okay. And the thing of it is, I mean, if you want to think about, the thought of like the two tablets being, like a paraphrase, and proper English numerical composition, the Ten Commandments, two tablets, being like a paraphrase, okay. And on the plateau, and the same principle of like Mount Olives, and the one word of the Book of Thessalonians being transfiguration, the alphanumerics of 192, of like, after the third day resurrecting and going to Mount Olives, and it's a plateau. And then ascending, re-entering heaven thing about, after the resurrection of the Lord Jesus Christ, okay? Well, anyway, that's the alphanumerics of 192. And the point that I'm really ultimately getting to is I'm trying to stay focused. But the thing about supplemental security income, okay, and the acronym SSI, I'm thinking about the ISS and the SSI, is that it has gotten to the point that my Now card is I mean, it's presented that prepaid card of like, Bluebird, American Express Bluebird prepaid card is like somewhere over the rainbow. Somewhere over the rainbow, bluebirds fly. Somewhere over the rainbow, da 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 da. Yeah, well, anyway, okay, like it's a 15-digit prepaid card with American Express. And when I went to Regions Bank to get that, specifically knowing that, I mean, all that information about it being 15-digit was exactly that. And I got a temporary card, I mean, within, within the second day, I mean, of being at home, it's kind of like, I mean, like what's going on with the fixer in real estate? As a medical power of attorney deciding whether or not if television program is going to be the idea of what only access means as whether or not the deed restriction is some idea of like management of a landlord. A medical power being a landlord or like a local area network as compared to internet protocol on, presenting the issue of national security. So like, all of a sudden the key to the city is like a continual confrontational thing, either while like I'm wiping my ass on the toilet or asleep or like the second I leave my home. And whether or not a programming is really the only issue of a medical power of attorney, not limited to a medical power of attorney, defining the meaning of whether a real estate is some idea of a fixture such as a television that would be more so on the advertisement side of a commercial venue of a living quarter, more so of even the programming itself of like what the thought is of a PG-13 rating of a W-2. I mean, ultimately, it gets to the point that repeatedly, everything is like a national security issue. Someone like wiping your ass on the toilet's a national security issue. Okay, a television programming is like a national security issue, yet it's provided like it's been a demanded request. That everyone accept, the programming of television itself is some idea that it's been a demanded, backed by popular demand, television program of K television, K radio, and as a result of like W2, and what some idea of the vice president network would only maybe be some idea of like presidential governors of parental guidance, or some idea like whether or not if having the right to assemble might only mean whether or not if programming is the only thought of like what the PTA means as some like charter district and zone idea of like the first 12 public grades of parentally guided stuff there in 12 public grades of like education. What charter and district and zoning means only to maybe what only a deed restriction might only present of like obviously it's a phenomenally huge secret of parental guidance of presidents and governors of PG-13 rating, or maybe whether it's a known or not known fact. I mean, it's obviously if it matters, it matters. I mean, if it doesn't, it doesn't. I mean, whether you know or not, obviously it happens anyway. It's really what the real deal is about it anyway. So I mean, the medical power of attorney using everything like on television programming, deemed as what is acceptable, every day on television, whether it's the world news thing, or like a national security issue, like a state of emergency, or a State of the Union address that would present maybe the thought of maybe whether if the State of the Union address is only the alphabet of 192, or some method of banking as like shareholders, theming, quality of like a boycott and embargo would only represent a method of holding and a method of banking. There's some idea of like whether or not if the front lines of the beach front is on the idea of clearance of immigration custom enforcement of a vice president network, or a VPN decide whether or not if piracy is only an acronym based upon a vice president or a via plenipotentiary's idea of only what a medical power of attorney would only suggest as maybe a safety issue with OSHA, or an operator presenting the ocean and the OSHA some safety Occupational Safety and Health Administration at the OSHA of construction and the building. And the thing about the building, being 78 and, some idea of like an FBI miracle and a heart god in 78 and some idea of escrow and what escrow is in real estate as compared to a commercial venue or a fixture in real estate being used to define meaning of what, some participating factor of, the body of Christ and the Holy Temple, manifest some like, some idea of like some degree level representative and single participation. I mean, everything like on television is like a national security issue, just turning it on. And in a medical power of attorney using a television programming of K television to decide whether or not if real estate or who's inside a home is being determined as a deed restriction, no matter where that person goes, or manufacturing the idea of like maybe antisocial behavior as only television programming and like a reality show like in progress, right? Or maybe the acceptance of the century, beyond the front lines of the beachfront of Lee Iacocca to Plymouth Rock. And the thing with this is that ultimately, Regents Bank is presenting the issue of like motion pictures defining the meaning of province as a region zero, or what that is to the equator and the operator, or really, whether or not if that's denying the citizenship and birthrights of every person born like on the North American continent, as whether or not if the degree levels of projected estimate option in the future is only an ongoing struggle of a method of banking throughout a person's entire life, and don't even realize or have the information or even onto the entire situation of a checking account representing a PG-13 rating of a W-2 form as employment, or the endorsement may be some idea like a sole proprietorship as a disregard, as a forfeiture, as an endorsement being managed as some idea of like checking a box in indiscretionally, whether it's a Schedule A or B of a 1040 or even the EZ form, just checking a box, and some idea of someone claiming, management over the fact and claiming every endorsed check as a sole proprietor in the form of like doing a little bit more than a DBA, doing business as like a 1040 form of a single sole proprietor of a business ownership, not necessarily an employee that don't even have the time to even talk, if you can even get a banker to even talk about like any of that. And most employees don't see themselves as database administrations or doing business as, because they endorse their own employment check or put into question as a national security issue some idea of willingness of doing business as if they only thought about it would be maybe the idea, maybe not necessarily a paraphrase or gratuity, tipping the scales of justice, or one Justice Park presenting the issue of whether or not if a stationary engineer is made to be on some domicile head of household on the toilet, and maybe got some toucan Fruit Loop technology of toucan Sam in the Ohio Silver, one of the oldest governmental computer mainframes called the Whopper computer mainframe. And from the toucan Sam thing of Fruit Loops for Purple Mountains match above the fruited plain is ultimately the front lines of the beachfront, the carbon footprint. And whether or not if the carbon footprint is only whether or not if the endorsement of an entire employment history as a projected estimate option in the future has some idea of equilibrium of actual participation of even a projected estimate option in the future of the PG-13 rating of a W-2 of presidents and governors and even parental guidance. And it's really, it's still not the excuse, right? Whether knowing or not knowing, it's just like not the excuse. Or having the option of knowing and, maybe using the same method of denying whether or not if an endorsement is on the issue of like a forfeiture of citizenship and birthrights, denying a birth certificate because it has a method of banking of like whether a certificate deposit is only the Bureau of Vital Statistics between the birth certificate and the death certificate, or what a method of holding only means as a boycott and embargo, some like spiritually valued issue of like purgatory and liquid equity and maritime law, all that stuff about international financial management and sand software, finding whether or not human capital only would be a result of whether or not if descendancy is a progression of ascending, in the direction, not necessarily being used as a third party easement in proper English grammatical composition, as an easement used for like royalties as the meaning and value and content of only participation, whether it's even a known or not known fact, whether for sole proprietorship is only the idea of information being used. I mean, if management is the whole entire point, whether it's a known or not known fact, international law, like who's doing who a favor when like it's like, a standard practice of like, managing entire neighborhoods in entire cities or counties or, anything less than, some idea of like making it great beyond like a local area network, internet protocol, a local area network beyond maritime law. And obviously, the whole point about Regions Bank is that security, supplemental security, is presenting the issue of like what normally comes along with the benefits is like Medicaid, okay? And now it's presenting the issue of like a well point, and it's identified as Medicare, not Medicaid. Okay, like I'm on SSI, Supplemental Security Income, and Amerigroup is normally associated with SSI, and now they're throwing the well point, which is a Medicare, and that's normally involving SSDI of disability as compared to Supplemental Security Income, and the acronym from SSI SSI is presenting, the well point that's obviously involving some idea of employment. I mean, I've been on, SSI for like, close to, probably 10 years. Okay, and now the thought of like WellPoint is presenting Medicare as an idea of benefits that would be like increased, and what employment really means, and like what is the deal about SSI getting the thought of like WellPoint involving Medicare as compared to SDI, or an increase in benefits that would all suggest that employment would be some idea of like not being limited as a limitation, and presenting some retroactive information that at one time was like the issue of limitation. And normally that involves the Social Security Administration of what employment only means, based upon, some idea of like knowing that certain ideas of involving 1099 forms and employers is either it's a sole proprietorship, or like it's a joint venture and merger of corporate law, business and corporate law of like, a joint venture and merger, providing, constant as a database administration and a direct source of funds, not really even dependent upon the profits of the productivity of like whatever business it is, like, I mean, anyway, and has that freedom, yet provides the service, and thoroughly not even dependent upon, yet it produces, that's the whole intent about even accomplishing, having the total freedom of like a database administration as a direct source, not necessarily dependent upon the productivity, yet, obviously it produces that as well. But thoroughly sometimes, it doesn't present the hardships and the idea of like thoroughly dependent upon, situational conditions that might, present variations of like consistency, if not instability, as compared to, a database administration as a direct source of a DBA, not necessarily doing business as a result of maybe what only one employee might mean in description, only endorsing an employment check deposited into a personal account. Not necessarily that it's like some idea of like a method of banking as maybe a fraudulent standard of business practice. So what is it that the DBA been doing business as present? As a medical power of attorney using a fixture in real estate, if television programming is or is not the issue, whether or not a deed restriction only presents whether or not there's some degree level of consensual participation of like reputable standards in consensual participation, is the only idea of, what a PG-13 and W-2 only results as whether or not if an endorsement only represents the idea of having fair use as an annuity or an IRA, or, the result of an ERISA statute, or, why nonprofit organizations, not necessarily the Fifth Amendment. Would that be an automatic issue? Why the Fifth Amendment is not a nonprofit organization? Is it really the DPA and only the DBA identifying whether or not if an endorsement is being used beyond like the employee's perception or actual participation, maybe only because of whether it's a box on a 1040 EZ or even a Schedule A or B of 1040, check the box. That's all it is. And really, it's not that at all. It's amazingly an employee even having time to like do anything beyond, what is required as participation. So that's a value of earned, some idea like earned annuities, earned hourly rate and wages, earned annuity, like an IRA. It's amazing. That is the word annuity. And it's on the form. It's kind of like, it's just like one word. The significant difference between an hourly rate or wages as compared to annuity, prepaid tax. Prepaid tax on what is earned to an employee is an hourly rate, or, or wages, or, some idea of like a monthly or bi-weekly method of payment. Yet at the same time, it presents, the one box, whether it's normally an annual bill, normally with employees, that whether it's Schedule A or B or 1040 EZ, just checking a box like, do you want us to go to an IRA? And normally employees thoroughly disregard it completely. And normally don't even like follow through or even have the time during business hours of what's required to go beyond what the description is of actually having a place of employment. So, like, all the endorsed checks that's going to the check being used and turned into a sole proprietorship, most employees don't even see themselves as sole proprietorship of owner of their own description of participation as an employee. The employer already knows that because the tax ID number is like not necessarily, the employee being used as a 1099 as a sole provider for their own earnings and don't even know the difference or like what's going on. Is really what it is, okay? So like with supplemental security, okay? I mean, if the DBA is only doing business as some idea of like whether or not it's some national security issue has presented, an acronym as a national security issue of doing business as, like a vice president network would present maybe immigration customs enforcement of like methods of banking, of importing and exporting some idea of like clearance of a boycott embargo only because of a method of banking resulting as a medical power of attorney used in fixture and real estate. Sometimes the idea of like 8 ohms representing some like idea of like, electronics and surveillance when television's like on, and when it's not on, it's like a presents itself as an American intelligence, yeah. Or even knowing, put a little bit of time on YouTube as legal media and not be confronted continually with some idea of like, a Wi-Fi manager or a VPN presenting some idea as an option of whether a virtual personal network has an acronym of a DBA doing business as a breaching the acronym itself of, a database administration and presenting the issue of like immigration and customs in the front lines of the beachfront as some like illegal alien, like penetrating, like the Bureau of Vital Statistics and like retrieving some like a quality of like having fair use of intellectual property of only what available information means is access as a medical power of attorney using fixture and real estate to decide whether or not if a deed restriction is only the idea of what a neighborhood means to like some person of even the Internal Revenue Service like on par or something like Better Business Bureau to decide whether or not if Vantage Love 30 is the only issue of whether if Better being the alphanumerics of 70 is only like Vantage and Vantage Love being like a secret de facto and 30 being, spelled out being like the alphanumerics of 100 yet numerically pronounced 30 is 30 and the map, the baby, the Bible, and the eagle and all that stuff about it. But the Vantage Love 30 thing about, a secret de facto is hopefully the thought that the Better Business Bureau, that one word, better being 70 and the alphanumerics of 108 being, business and the operator and what 0 is, I'll say even of the latitude, 0 degree, of the equator, and the operator, and region 0, huh? So anyway, like what point is being thrown in on, my SSI, representing some idea, like whether or not, if Social Security Administration is even going to admit whether or not if a BNC number is only thought of like, some claim of management, or some idea of like whether or not if a DBA is presenting some idea of like a medical power of attorney identifying like a national security issue of all the acronyms as an option, whether it's a known or not known fact is obviously what it's always been and still is, okay? So like Regions Bank, okay, is throwing that stuff in combination with like what's going on with my SSI and the Social Security Administration, and now it seems to be the Wells Fargo information presenting, the digital wallet as like available, in the way of like oh god, the what account is it? It is the digital wallet thing about the clear access banking, and the description of it presents it as a position. The way it's all described is it presents it as like an administrative function of like anyone that gets an account that doesn't even know that possibly they're being accused of being an administrative function penetrating the front lines of a banking system and don't even know that they're potentially being granted, some high privilege, high society, some, meaning in economics that has achieved and accomplished some meaning and values, don't even know that they've been given a title and position in a banking system called, clear access banking, like there's some dictative command control, or some like a person in the bank that don't even know like what's going on. I mean, so like somewhere between like, the digital and the digital and the electronic, banking, clear access banking, the terminology with Wells Fargo is presenting that's not even available and couldn't even get it at Wells Fargo yet. I have the account go to Regions Bank, and now it seems to be all the information from Wells Fargo has fair use of like Regions Bank and like presents, some deviant that like Wells Fargo is actually giving the appearance of like Regions Bank, of a 16-digit card, of a debit card, of a checking account. And Clear Access Banking is not a prepaid card. But Clear Access Banking, likewise, is not a checking account of Wells Fargo. And presents itself as a 16-digit. And how true, if that's even the truth, because I know that a prepaid card is 15 digits. And like the 15th letter is like O, and the alphanumerics of like, face value, okay? And it's not like necessarily a question of MP4 format or like YouTube or television, okay? As compared to, the separation between church and state, or some idea of like available in closed captioning for the hearing impaired. Or, what really security cameras in a bank really present, that way. So, like, all that's going on, like with my SSI, and now it's presenting the WellPoint, presenting some idea that Medicare has been, like, somehow included with all my information in a BNC number that Social Security Administration has not really even identified. And has virtually almost avoided every possible means of avoiding answering anything about it. So, like, the real deal, it seems to be whether or not, if getting benefits that would be increased, would maybe be the thought of maybe not being SSI, yet the Texas Public, the Department of Public Safety Texas driver's license has the DD on it. I usually didn't have that. And I'm not sure, what the reason is and how and when it really actually started. And when I really noticed it, that was like one of my first questions. What does that DD on my driver's license mean? My Texas driver's license is expired, and I have a Texas ID that originally when I got it, they were saying that, that I hadn't used my driver's license. I just, like, didn't have a need to drive, okay? I almost refused to drive because, like, every time I leave and went grocery shopping, my transportation was, like, being some, like, on-par crap about, it's not vandalism. It's not piracy. It's not depreciation. It's not hate crime. It's not whether or not if a severance pay is some idea of like a dissolution of like a joint venture merger, or a breach based upon maybe economic value, and maybe leaving a checking account, or some idea of like whether anyone knows or not knows whether how to leave or being allowed to leave even a bank and get into the investment side, or leave a checking account that's mostly not normally even thought of as a Ulysses S. Grant issue of like principles of like information of a student loan, and some idea of like a debate class in political science over like what's going on in the classroom, or like who knows what's going on with the annotation in the classroom that way. Ultimately, if the annotation is only a result of whether or not if accomplishing anything, it's only the thought of some computational issues of, some idea of a demanding requirement of being on the front lines of the beachfront, and some idea of, like, of being used only as liquidable equity of maritime law, make it be on the front lines of the beachfront of internet protocol. If a medical power of attorney is continually the issue and presenting the issue of, like, whether or not if a DBA is only presenting now the idea that WellPoint is a progressive means of more benefits in the way what SSI originates as, not always, is sometimes straight into the thought of like SSDI. Okay, and WellPoint is most definitely about the Medicare. Okay, not necessarily the Medicaid. So like, what's going on? And the BNC number, associated with some idea what was previously not always like, really even available when America was like the SSI thing. It still isn't being even identified in the Social Security Administration, or whether or not that increased benefits would be, hey, like why don't you just like put it and like really say, what it really is, and put, all that, hey, you need to figure it out, have some brains about yourself, and maybe online, not maybe. I have the issue of whether knowing or not knowing if the accusation is an breach of national security. Like, once again, it's like every freaking day, just turning television on. Just turning K television on. It's like, oh my God, like, there's potentially an acronym that needs like an issue that might need, governance. And maybe present issue of the freedom of maybe the idiocy of not knowing that maybe the accusation of sole proprietor is only the idea of an endorsement of an entire employment history being some accusation as a forfeiture or method of garnishment and not even know, really what's going on. Or some idea like a 1099 of an entire history of employment being turned into a sole proprietorship of a single owner of an ownership of a business, like their own earnings, and don't even know that some idea of maybe whether they or not if an IRA has been checked. And to find the meaning of annuity of one word, on the tax form, as compared to the earned wages, or, the hourly rate, or, the salary. Depending upon, the description, and whether or not, if knowing or not knowing, it's just indiscretionally whether participation is even given the time or the allowance beyond the description itself of, like, earned wages, or, some idea of what management, normally don't even identify itself, having fair use of, like, an entire, idea of, like, an entire neighborhood, and, like, an entire continent, and, like, an entire television network of Region Zero, and, like, motion picture, and what that is to Regions Bank as compared to some on-par stuff between some idea of whether or not of, a PG-13 rating of a W2 is only, 2 9-hole golf courses, identifying, seeing colors between, hey, I like a Sprite new, or some, like, idea of jurisprudence having a black back, or if at the point of space exploration, if the black back is the only idea of, like, a constitutional law using, state statutes annotation, and the one warehousing word of the black color code of constitutional law. Out of the entire black volume of, constitutional law itself, the black book, as well as, like, state statutes annotated, the black book, and out of the entire situation, only warehouse districting presents the importing and exporting of warehousing of, like, domestic, monetary domestic and gross national product, and gross national product being the thing about, importing and exporting of warehousing, and the one word of color code being black, repudiation, associated with jurisprudence, the pastel green, of, like, hey, I like the Sprite in you, the colors of Sprite and on par, and whether or not, if anyone on par can even prove that they're not black, is ultimately what it's getting to, of Jose, can you see? Yeah, Jose, can you see? It's not like, there's that only, like a stationary engineer sitting on some domiciled head of household on the toilet, in need of, like, maybe, for Purple Mountain's majesty, of, like, some plateau beyond the front lines of the carbon footprint on the front lines of the beachfront, or some idea of an acronym, doing business as, or some, like, like maybe some idea of, like, the front lines of the beachfront. Lord, where were you when I need you most? And that the answer in reply was like, that's when I was carrying it. See, the answer about, like, a military barrel, the tournament, on the front lines of the beachfront of Immigration's Custom Enforcement, a Vice President network, as compared to the acronym VPN being a virtual personal network. Like, hey, man, like, really, what's going on, Mr. President? So, whether knowing or not knowing is all that ought to be hinted and clued in, repeatedly, throughout an entire lifetime, or having some, like, idea of, like, an American DJ using the seashell and, the shape of the ear canal, like, the anatomy side of, like, hearing in the ear, being, like, the idea of, like, a seashell is, like, the similarities of our so very much alike. You have the sound effect called the tube of a seashell on the front lines of the beachfront, normally an American DJ, and some idea of, like, a specific sound effect with the sound of a seashell. It's so intense, it's unreal, unlike anything being talked to that way of, like, traffic masters and American DJs, and I guarantee you it'll never be forgotten when a person hears that, like, while driving around, of helicopters, like, all around, and it's kind of like, hey, like, no matter, hey, whatever it needs to mean thing, in certain factors, like, even jets, and some idea of, like, flybys, and some, like, alphanumeric altitude of, like, even, the idea of, like, barometric altimeters of, like, condensing residuals. Almost the same way of the Orion performance monitoring, and, like, measuring the nanoluminance of the mandatory requirements of hot air balloons producing the required element, or, like, even of a rainbow. But in any case, so, like, it goes on and on. So, like, now WellPoint is being thrown in on my SSI, and potentially WellPoint is identifying, the thought that it's like Medicare, okay, and the thought of, like, increased benefits from, like, that go up to, like, right now receiving on SSI like 943 a month, would be the thought of like increasing to like 3,600 and something. I think is like right now the max of like SSDI. And the thing about the Texas driver's license and the DD, the Department of Public Safety won't even say what even it is. And I'm asking, is that where the DD is, or the public Department of Public Safety driver's license? The DD is at the SSDI, and like the acronym of ISS and SSI of an International Superstar or International Space Station, misappropriation allocation to Mississippi. And what all that is, to, someone swimming upstream and Calamity Jane at prepaid postage, and what the latter is, as compared to the jet stream and like the stream and like paying for gold during the gold rush and all that stuff about it. Okay, and the thing about it is that ultimately, benefits increasing, and like no one having anything to say, and now see, I've been studying African American linguistics, and has been such a huge major indication. I mean, it's so phenomenally the word relation that leads so very much to the answer in virtually every practical application of value and meaning of normally, involving, the idea of banking and, even beyond, the thought of like the Treasury using money as a categorization, because anything really beyond, a method of banking is beyond, the thought of paper made, or the idea of like, Roe v. Wade similarities of like Ulysses S. Grant, a student loan on a continual basis of whether or not a television program and a medical power of attorney using television programming, that's whether if the television's on or off, deciding whether or not the deed restriction is only attached to an address or state of the union address, or maybe everyone like inside of it, whether or not a participation is some idea of like television programming, or the actual accusation of a request as compared to a demanded standard, or what just availability means and distribution as like programming on television of like, a PG-13 of like obviously a W2 involving, W television and radio as well as K television and radio. I mean, all that's like going on. I mean, not knowing it would really be not knowing or even believing it's even involved, when in fact that's what it is. I mean, every second of the day and night. I mean, that's what it will always be, and it's what it's always been, really, is what it is. Not knowing it's like not really hearing or having a hint or a clue about like any of it, believing it, even with a hint or a clue, believing it, and even really knowing without a doubt. I mean, getting the word out of anyone, it's obviously, well, it's, like, hey, like, well, that wasn't, necessarily, the thought of, participation at the time, but in any case, so like there's like the issue of like WillPoint presenting Medicare in a way of SSDI, yet I'm on SSI. So like, does that like change the meaning of my Texas driver's license that is expired? I mean, is that only when it happens? Is when it's expired? I mean, so like, what's going on with expired Texas driver's license? Is that only when like the change takes place, or when participation is a known fact of like it's just not happening that way? So like all of a sudden, like the DDs on my driver's license of an expired driver's license, okay? Yet I got a new like copy of it, okay? And actually, during while it was expired, the DD was like placed on my card during an expired, copy of my driver's license, okay? So like, what's going on? So like, I'd ask, Department of Public Safety, hey, what's the DD on my driver's license? And now it seems to me, now WellPoint, as compared to Amerigroup, some like idea of like transition, like really, it still hadn't got a word out of anyone. But like I really can't read, write, English, okay? So like read all that, okay? So now it's presented itself as like some idea of increased benefits, like really, is that like happening with an expired driver's license? So does that mean that participation is not necessarily the thought of a VIN number, or would that be the one Justice Park thing as compared to the TC gesture thing? Somewhere in between the FBI and CIA, there's like FBI being 17 and CIA being 13. The difference of it, yay, the 4 thing, or is it really the Acura being the alphanumerics of 44 and the DD of Acura? They seem to be like really not limited to even the thought of Mercedes-Benz, distributing what was then, the Smart 42 smart car, And ultimately it got to, the Saturn Sky and the Scion IQ, which are the two. Um, the Scion IQ looks like a smart car, yet, the Saturn Sky looks like a smaller version of the Corvette. And really, ultimately, I thought about the Lexus LFSA. It's like the Smart for Two of the LF and SA, and it's like the coolest, most advanced compact concept. Uh, 2015 Geneva, Switzerland summit meeting, and that's like really something cool that would be like really cool to be made available for SSI and SDI is that Lexus LFSA. Likewise, looking at Lexus and the Lexus ES 300 hybrid, and now looking at the thing about the Lexus ES 350 hybrid. I mean, those are got to be and the Lexus UX SUV. I mean, really, and the Audi, what seems to be the A6 of the Quattro designs are like really awesome. The thing about the intersecting axis of Audi seems to be the significance of even the nomial, binomial, trinomial, when the rules apply, and what the rules are to the exclusionary rule provision of like this axis, intersecting axis of Audi, or some idea of like legal media as an MP3 format, and in coordination with the thought of like a MP4 format of like YouTube. What intersecting axis is that way of like even the electronic schematic fish of some like cycle per second and oscillation of like even the intersecting axis of the four circles of Audi, presenting almost the same issue of like a chronological of one cycle half above and half below, and the now thing, and like even the principle of practical application of McDonald's golden arches of a degree level of reputable standards of consensual participation, like side by side in a whole different perspective as compared to one cycle half above and half below, and the chronological and the alignment of parallel universe and the now thing, giving the same impression of McDonald's golden arches, presenting the chronological as an equating equal thing about looking like the electronic schematic fish of the Christian symbolic representation of Christianity that people put on their cars. Okay, well anyway, yeah, so like even the intersecting axis of Audi presents the electronic representation of what would be vertical in that way of the four circles intersecting, giving the impression of the Christian symbolic symbol in a whole different perspective that can simply and easily be one cycle per second, a half above and below, and a chronological moved into the now thing of a degree level of reputable standards of consensual participation in the whole different perspective and same practical application principle of McDonald's golden arches that way, and what gold is, price going up and down that way. But anyway, it's kind of like looking into the well point and all that stuff and the information being presented like a potential like an increase of like benefits, and still can't get a word out of anyone. It's just like happening. And now like the Regions Bank is presenting the Now card as what gives me the impression of a digital wallet in the form of clear access banking of Wells Fargo, using like Regions Bank of the account at Wells Fargo as a giving the impression and appearance of like Regions Bank as a 16-digit. Yet Wells Fargo doesn't even present that as a prepaid. Yet it presents it as the clear access banking, like it's a position within the banking system, and isn't even at Wells Fargo. All that information is at Regions Bank, with Insight presenting the entire issue originating from Wells Fargo. It's really what it is. And it's like really not cool with all that idea of like who's confusing who. Who you trying to kid? My account is set up as a prepaid card at Regions Bank, not Wells Fargo, but all the information is only provided with Wells Fargo as a clear access banking. And clear access banking is obviously presenting the issue of like what administration and a position inside the bank, not necessarily, some idea of deposit and check as a direct deposit, or some idea of like an executive position described at Wells Fargo, not even there. and happens at Regions Bank, and some idea of the insights being presented of an administrative that hasn't even proven that I can even access the whole entire situation, didn't even enroll in it. So, like, what's all that about immigration and customs enforcement? Placing some idea in between the description of like clear access banking and Wells Fargo, obviously presenting Wells Fargo, just giving the appearance of a card as like Regions Bank. Is it that it's not Regions Bank? Or is it like a national security issue of a DBA? Doing business as there's some like breach of national security and some idea of like immigration customs enforcement or vice president network. Or some idea of a virtual personal network, some idea of breaching, the sole proprietorship of a 1099, checking a box of an IRA on its 1040EZ as compared to WellPoint presenting that fact that involves employment. Yet having, SSI for like more than 10 years, employment hadn't really been a factor, at all, normally presenting some idea of what was then limitations on employment, even meeting requirements and eligibility for to even receive SSDI with more benefits. Yet now it's just like being thrown at me, and now an account at Regions Bank is presenting a negative account balance on a card that's not even supposed to be anything other than a direct deposit, and not one check in any kind of way is being used as a deposit, not by me, not anyone. Only insights inside as an administrative function has caused me some freaking bookkeeping issues of whether or not if a medical power of attorney is only using a fixture in real estate to decide whether or not if a deed restriction is really inside the bank at Regions Bank using Wells Fargo's information, or Wells Fargo breaching, the integrity of like some golf course and some idea like, well, it's not really a breach because you see there's like the book jurisprudence in the law library with a black bag presenting all the color codes of repudiation in warehousing and like, gross national product, the color code, all that black stuff of like Fox 29 News and Roger 99er and Foxtrot, Roger 99er Foxtrot, huh? Or was that like the black color code of Independence Day, huh? Celebration of what, Abraham Lincoln, the freedom of select, some color code, and Abraham Lincoln's, duration during, the only president studying in the dark, identifying, like programming as like the issue of like Ajax and some like, cleansing factor of like Washington, and how the kernel is identified as computer programming. Not necessarily, it doesn't even have to be a partition, but like who are you trying to kid about the acronym of a DBA? For real, okay? who are you trying to kid? Whether or not if Washington is only using Ajax as a thought of like, Abraham Lincoln night vision, like the white guy, the only president like studying in the dark, and the language Ajax being used with some idea of like American history of the kernel, identifying, some idea of programming somewhere between architecture and platform, embedding encryption, and that's exactly what it is of like international financial management is really what it is, okay? So like, what's going on with my Regions Now card, okay? Is it 15 digits or not? Is it Wells Fargo or not? Who are you trying to kid? That's obviously exactly what it is and is not. So like, what do you have to say about it? Wells Fargo and like Social Security Administration and Vice President and all the acronyms of VPN. For real, like, what do you have to say about it? Yeah, great, okay. So like, yeah, academics, huh? Oh, it's like really cool, isn't it? Sure it is. Can't you tell? It's like tonal quality and reverberation and resonance and, all tonal quality inside of it. I don't mean to sound like a promiscuous tambourine with a cover charge at a Tribe of Judah Jubilee or some antisocial drumhead, reflecting some like idea like between, Univision, like a Remo black dot drumhead and an Aquarian power white dot, some color coded pastels of Univision. Some idea of legal media and deposition between like the Houston Post and like Univision at the intersecting, thing of Highway 59 being 140 in Pearland, Texas, and attenuation and alpha marriage and FBI psychology minus, the 22 thing and FDIC and RCA and all that stuff about, a Purple Heart, huh? 140, huh? For Purple Mountain's Majesty. Are you sure it's not for a Purple Heart and the Heartbeat of America in today's Chevrolet? Purple Heart being 140, huh? Or like Holy Miracles, huh? I know it sounds like all like holy and like religious and spiritually valued. So heavenly, right? Is that really what, is that really what you want it to sound like? So like, does it sound like everything you hope and imagine in your dreams could be like right now with what I have to say? Does it sound like maybe they themselves in proper numerical composition? on the front lines of the beach, right? Defining the meaning of like whether or not the participation is only the issue of immigration customs enforcement, or Vice President Network. Or somebody should have like what are citizenship and birthrights is some idea of non-negotiable, non-transferable itemization only as a method of banking. Or medical power attorney using like fiction and real estate to find the meaning whether or not if a deed restriction is just, some idea of like a coverage as a national security issue. Granting, some idea of a deed restriction, or is that like the Leaning Tower of Pisa? It's a double // of CC's Pizza like going on with my chimney. CC's Pizza, huh? Double // huh? The Leaning Tower of Pisa, huh? It's like chimney rock, huh? So like what's going on with my foundation? The Lord Jesus Christ, like, knew before the foundations of the earth. Does that mean that the carbon footprint is not really considered maybe a forfeiture based upon an endorsement? Or some amphibious saying of like, California being all purple in 88 about Oldsmobile Delta 88 and the New Deal Act of Roosevelt between 6 presidential terms of Theodore to Franklin. Somewhere in between like Los Angeles and like Houston and South America, Six Flags and all that stuff. Well, anyway, it's already going on like an hour, 1 minute, and 5 seconds. So, like, you know what? I'm going to take a break, okay?